turn an attendance code around. There's a couple more up here if you hadn't done those. And if you're not familiar, just open your camera app up on your phone and then it'll recognize the code and you just tap on it. It'll allow you to take attendance. And then same thing on the, I wanted to give you the handout digitally. So there's a little QR code on the back of that, on the second page of your handout. That is this electronically, because there are a couple of links in it. And wanted to keep it really simple this morning. Instead of doing a PowerPoint with a bunch of whiz-bang 1990s graphics in it, I figured a 1.5 pager is better. There's a guy at the state board several years ago, and he's retired now, but he put in a BAM after an important point. And he would do the emerald thing, and that got kind of old after, the 10th presentation that he did for us, because it was one of those things where we had to go to his meeting, and you had to sit there and listen to the BAMs. And so anyway, I have vowed away PowerPoint in my life, and I read that Bezos and a few other people who are who rule the world, they're part of the cabal, as Paige says, who control our daily lives. They've thrown away PowerPoint because it's ineffective at this point. So thank y'all for being here and sweating it out with me this morning. So what we're doing actually is hot yoga and not leadership. So Jonathan, if you're still in.
I feel better this way than this bed. A little bit wider. We're narrow than I have wide. So.
Well, hey, that's why we put the tables in all the buildings. We
Don't make this
Sounds like you got a lawsuit on you.
Your name's real.
That's right. Well, give people. We'll take 30 on those. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. You got more with you, Crystal?
Oh, there's several.
Oh, no. Brought the Elliott girl. She's a troublemaker. Just walked in and didn't get I had a handout, so if you did not get a handout, if somebody has already scanned the QR code, if you could share that page, because I have to bring an extra with me, and let them use their phone app and get to the handout. There's a couple links in there I wanted you to be able to see and engage with. So if you just walked in, said to the others that you're in hot yoga this morning and not a presentation on leadership. They have supposed to be working on it. Text them, so we'll hopefully by noon when you're done, it'll begin coming off. So leadership, I pulled a definition here, and I'm by no means an expert in leadership. I'm here before you today because I was asked to talk about it, honestly. And so I wanted to do that. And I told Charlie beforehand, Charlie's probably a better expert on talking about leadership than I am, and that's true, because if you follow him on Facebook or LinkedIn, then you see Charlie posts a lot and has a lot of wisdom that he shares with his students about leadership and growing oneself, which is really what I want to talk about today more than leading anybody else, because there's some common threads that I have discovered over the last maybe decade or so about leadership, and the main one is that it begins with us. So I searched for a bunch of different definitions of leadership, and then of course there are textbook definitions, and there's some really good ones, there are some really simple ones that maybe distill it too much. Leadership is influence. Well, I mean, it is, but you can also influence other people by the command and control method of leadership, which is maybe not the healthiest way to do it. Sometimes some people don't respond unless you do command and control occasionally, but that's not the best way or the most effective way to lead. So I came to this definition after looking at my physical resources, textbooks, and then Google, which is a trusted scholarly tool. And I always taught my comp students that. But no, this guy, Kevin Cruz, and I don't know if it's Cruz or Cruzy, because I know some people in Texas and his name is spelled like this and he calls it Cruzy, so we'll call him Cruz. But this guy has written, he's a New York Times bestseller on leadership topics, and he owns a corporate coaching company. So he has a lot of experience with Fortune 500 companies and working with their leadership. And he goes through some of those different definitions of leadership that others have given. If you're familiar with Peter Drucker, he has a really basic one. Bill Gates has a different one, and he goes through some other people like that. But this definition, I feel like, is pretty encompassing. Leadership is a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. And it hits all the points that it needs to. It is a little bit, stuffy in its language. Another way that I might say it is that, leadership empowers others to be the best person that they can be. And that is what I strive for every day with my team that I work with on a daily basis, a weekly basis, is to help give them the tools, the resources, the feedback when needed to empower them to become better themselves. And no organization, team, whatever, ever became good or great if the subordinates are constantly belittled and beat on, harped on every day. Teams become great because they are empowered to become the best versions of themselves that they can be. So with that said, this line and the next one, the next few things are from, if you look at the bottom or the back of the second page, there's a little resource list where this information comes from. And again, there's a common thread between all of these, but these are 4 books that I come back to again and again because they are foundational, I think, to leadership and to leading oneself. So, Don Maxwell, which is, he's written 1 million books on leadership. I don't know that he's ever led anything, an organization other than his own, but he is very prominent in the field. He said the first person you lead is you. And others say the same thing when you look at the literature. And they often use the example of how you dress or how you look, how your hair is or whatever. If you walk in, and Charlie, you probably see this in your classroom, that students walk in and they're disheveled or haven't bathed.
I do see that. Yeah.
Occasionally, right? I thought you may be familiar in an intimate way. And hopefully your room's not 84 degrees like this one, but it probably is. But it matters. When you see somebody like that, you probably assume, and maybe rightly so, that they're not leading themselves very well. And there's some examples that are counter to that. There's some senator in Connecticut or Vermont, I can't remember, New Hampshire maybe. It's probably New Hampshire, Vermont. But he is notorious, like he got in trouble for wearing jeans, I think, on the legislative floor. Like he's maybe a counter example to that, but he does it to make a point about decorum and all of that. So that's a little different. What matters most is what you do day by day of the long haul. And this point is simply that leadership is not something that comes in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. It grows over a lifetime, so that hopefully by the end we have become good leaders, and we have empowered a lot of other people and influenced them. And I think about this in the context of your classroom. If you're a classroom instructor, and your title of instructor, to me, I always thought you are a leader, because you're the person who stands here and you have control over all of those people in front of you. And you are literally empowering them to, in y'all's case, many of your case, to go help save lives. And there's nothing more critical than that. Or it's to achieve some goal that they might have, no matter how small it might seem to us. But I think back to, there's a lady here in town who, at the time, she was trying to get into nursing school. What's up, Brian? And she was having trouble. So we had to talk about small wins first. And my comp class was, a small win for her. And she got through my class, she did great. She was a good bit older, coming back to school, and she didn't fit. She didn't feel like she belonged with all the 18, 19-year-olds. But she stuck with me through Comp 1, Comp 2, and then she ended up taking a lit class to get points, I think. Ended up getting a nursing school, and now she's a nursing supervisor here locally. And she did these things, that I tried to empower her to do, and she was able to do it and reach her goals. So no matter if it's life-saving or just passing the class, those things add up for the people, and they have an influence that, as you know, as an instructor, you don't see immediately. It doesn't come by very often, the feedback from students, the positive feedback, It's always, why don't you give me this grade? Or why don't you cut me out? Or why don't you talk to me that way? But occasionally you get the feedback and you get a thank you. And you have an influence that you don't even realize sometimes, and it is really important, and it goes for generations, because we have, we turn generational, I hate to say wealth, but we turn generational maybe lifestyle quality around every day in the classroom. So this list of leaders versus followers is from Maxwell too, and I thought it was apt because he makes a list that parallels, which I like. So leaders are ones who initiate things. They lead by picking up the phone and making contact, or emailing, or going to see someone. They're not going to sit back passively. They're going to act. They spend time planning and anticipating problems, and this is really important. We'll come back to it in a second. They invest time with people. They fill the calendar by priorities. To contrast that, followers react to things that happen. They listen. They wait for the phone to ring. They spend time living day to day reacting to problems. So they put out fires nonstop. They spend time with people instead of investing time with people. So those are two different things, right? They fill the calendar by requests instead of their priorities. Let's go back to that spend time planning and anticipating problems versus this one. So if you teach from 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock every day, some of you do, how do you make time for that one? Planning and anticipating problems. Not a trick question, I promise. Just think of the hours in the day. So when would you do it?
Well, for us in health sciences, equipment issues, you've got to be prepared for if physical equipment goes down, what's your backup plan? So you've always got to have plan B.
Right.
Because the equipment can work 5 minutes before you go in to use it, and then it's not there. So anticipating that problems like that, just in teaching students by our example, how we handle problems in the real workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a twofold win when you sort of know that it's a possibility to have another plan, and then when the students see that they see you work through an issue.
That's good. Thank you, Vicky.
I think in nursing, at least for us, we're teaching, like your example, 8 to 2, we have these same students.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a problem, we know about it. I mean, we're gonna know about it throughout that
Right.
8 to 2 time period because we're with the same ones. But I know it's different if you've got a new group every 50 minutes,
Sure. Well, if you do, does somebody in here fit in that category where you teach from 8 to 3 maybe, and you got different students throughout that time? Well, that's good. I'm glad.
I think you're always multitasking too, because you're anticipating those problems and trying to solve them while you're also doing something else sometimes.
It can be. And I'm, I do it occasionally, multitask. I try not to because I'm not good at doing multiple tasks at the same time. And I think the data backs that up, that humans are not multitaskers. We can do multiple things at the same time. We may not be able to do them all well.
My daughter says I'm ADD, because I jump from one thing to the other, trying to multitask, but I never get anything.
You just have piles everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm guilty. We're all guilty of that. But the literature does say, and I encourage you to be intentional with your time, and that's what I'm getting at with this, is that you have to spend time planning, maybe not every day, but every week probably, and step back from your nose to the ground. And there are a whole bunch of different cliches that say the same thing. You can't see the forest for the trees, right? All of those things. So that's what this is. Step back and take a Google, if you're looking at Google Maps, get a little bit higher view. So instead of the 150-foot view where you can see your street and maybe your neighbor's house, then go up to 10,000 feet and use Stewart's drone, and you get up where you can see the whole town, or maybe go up higher where you can see the whole region. And that's the kind of thing that will help you a lot in planning ahead and anticipating things that are going to happen. So I really encourage you to spend time doing that, intentional time, planning and anticipating things that will happen. I'd love to say that we anticipated COVID in 2020. That did not happen. I remember still the day we were in the cafeteria. Me and Rod Coggin were sitting down eating lunch, and he was like, "Hey, you seen this COVID thing?" "Yeah, I saw it. We got our first case in the U.S." But I was like, I pulled up the map, the Johns Hopkins map. It's like there's only like 47 cases. I mean, what's going to happen? And here we are. So you can't anticipate everything, but we quickly set time aside and made plans to handle and manage. We're constantly reassessing that based on the best knowledge and information that we have on a day-to-day basis, because as you know, it changes. Second bullet point is shifting gears to the topic of emotional intelligence, and I want to share this book with you. I brought Show and Tell, but this is one that I think is indispensable for anybody. Emotional Intelligence 2.0. There is a 1.0. It's not called that. It's just emotional intelligence. Daniel Goldman is the original person who came up with this. Bradbury is the author of this one, and if I remember correctly, he and other folks, they run a business where this is what they do. And again, they kind of coach corporations and individuals. But the whole idea of emotional intelligence, you're very familiar with IQ, of course, how quote unquote smart you are. And do you think that is the best measure of your intelligence? Absolutely not, Don't we all know a lot of dumb or stupid people who are really wealthy? Yeah. We're like, I missed the boat. Like, or the Northeast. What did I do wrong? Dude down there at the gas station, he's got, got $1 million. He's the one selling vaping pens. Like, what the heck? And no joke, like on YouTube, I saw this kid, literally kid, and they interviewed him. It's one of those things, there's a guy on YouTube and he walks up to random people, usually in South Florida, and I don't know if you've seen this or not, they're driving really nice cars. He's like, how do you make your money? Right? What do you do for a living? So he walks up to this kid, and literally like 19 years old, And he's like, how'd you make your money? He's like, oh, on a fake job. Right? That's his life. So, I mean, if money is your driver, you wouldn't be sitting here, I suspect. There is something else that makes you tick. And I suspect that it's what we're talking about, that it's empowering other people in some kind of way to become their best self. And that's why you're sitting here today at Northeast and not in the private sector making a whole lot more money, which we all know that every one of us in here can do. Paige and I joked a lot over the break about we can try about billboards because they're everywhere now. You know, come work here, start and pay more than we pay a teacher here. Okay? We saw one for Lane. You can go to Lane and work if you have some upholstery skills, I'm sure, some frame skills, which you can pick up pretty quickly, right in there. You can pick it up quickly.
Hard, heavy, or.
It is. If you're willing to do it though, you got strong hands and back, $34 an hour. Okay, do the math on that. 2,080 hours a year is a work year. So you're looking at about 70 grand a year to do that.
And
You
they'll
have to-
hire you if you don't have a high school diploma.
No, they don't.
You
They don't
have a
care.
pulse.
So, you know, again, what are we all doing here? There's something different that motivates us to be here than going in and making frames or pulling fabric or cutting foam every day. And if you're like, yeah, well, I just thought I wanted to help people, then that's okay too. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Jonathan knows I talked to him a lot about vehicles, and just before we started today, I was talking to him about one that I've been working on and scratching my head right now about. There are many days I'd rather be doing that. I mean, that's what I did all break was work on junk because I enjoy it, and I know at least one person in here has a father who's the same way, likes to work on stuff. So emotional intelligence. Many of those qualities that we talked about above, and I skipped over those. These things: decisiveness, self-trust, introspection, discipline, common sense, empathy. Empathy maybe is the most important one on that list. Understanding someone else's plight in life and where they are. And that's not to say that people won't deceive you, because they will. You've heard every excuse in the book from your students. So you have to gauge, is this genuine or not? But still, the first reaction ought to be empathy. Decisiveness is important. You can't be a leader by being wishy-washy on decisions. That's why politicians, they go all in, right? They'll all the way, like, a lot of times way too far, probably, one way or another, but they make a decision. And that's the point where I think many politicians fail, is that you make a decision, you have to be willing to say as a leader, I made a mistake. Like, we didn't do that right. The biggest mistake we've probably made at the college in recent memory is how we rolled out and introduced pathways. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because we've been talking about that for a long time, but we could have rolled it out a lot better. I'm not ashamed to admit it, and we're going to reiterate, and we're going to go back and get better and better at that. But it happens, because we are all human. So you have to trust yourself to be able to make those decisions, number one, and that's based on your experience in many cases. So emotional intelligence, here's the definition, is your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and others, and your ability to use this awareness to manage your behavior and relationships. There are 4 skills that make up emotional intelligence. They're listed here, and there's 2 competencies. The first row, personal competencies, self-awareness, self-management. So you have to be aware, number 1, of your own emotions when you feel them. And this is something that I was thinking about. So there's a link here in just a second. I thought, well, I mean, can you name off the top of your head our basic emotions as human beings? what would you say?
Anger.
Anger, happiness, sadness, fear, that's the big one, right? So if you click this, the second link there, you can see this will help you understand your emotions a little bit, because our emotions aren't always labeled as the big category words up here, right? We don't recognize that being maybe, I don't know, let's say frustrated is necessarily anger in that category, or some of these other words. So I like this chart because it's an intensity chart too. So the words in the bottom row, obviously, low intensity. So if you're feeling glad, you're not like, that's a lot different than being excited or elated. That's, I guess, the old composition instructor, but somebody taught me at one point about action verbs. If you got kids, you learn about action verbs. Well, there's a difference between walk, saunter, sashay, right? So if Chris sashays into this room, that's different than him sauntering or walking into the room this morning. So the same thing with these emotions. So you can use those words, just use this chart as a reference whenever you are trying to be self-aware, to recognize what you're feeling in that moment. And all of this is, 45-minute discussion of leadership is barely even taking the wrapper off of it. But these tools will help you get there. So I wanted to introduce the concept. Use that chart to help you recognize your emotions. And once you do that, the second task, you're supposed to do all four of these things together, but self-management is another area of emotional intelligence. Self-discipline is the hardest thing that I think we have to do, because it forces us every day to wake up and constantly want to get better at something. And if you're a fan of Shawshank Redemption, you remember the line that Morgan Freeman's character says to Tim Robbins' character, either get busy living or get busy dying. That's what this is. Self-management forces you to get busy living and get busy getting better. And that's stated a bunch of different ways in different sources of popular media and books as well. Social awareness is one where a competency most of us on some level lack in a different category. The good thing about this book, if you buy this book, it's not expensive, but buy the actual book. There's strategies for each of these four competencies. And you'll take an emotional intelligence quiz. You get a code to take the quiz. You can take a bunch of free quizzes online. The problem with them that I found, and I teach this to my students every year in the honors class that I teach, the free ones don't break it down into these four categories. So they're not analogous. So when you do the four categories, you will get a score in each of those areas. And whatever you're low in, you can go and pick out strategies that maybe help you address blind spots you have within yourself. So that's really useful to me. Social awareness, the biggest one that I see and deal with is probably people not listening when other people are talking. Actively listening. And we've talked about that at the college in different ways, but you see it with your students, in your relationships, personal relationships probably, and then with your coworkers. So actively listening and not thinking about, in particular, what you're about to say next in response to that person. Sometimes people will trip over themselves saying when somebody else is talking to them because they're so anxious to get out. But this, but I think this. It's very important to let the other person talk and hear them. Hear the words that they're saying. Digest those. figure out, number one, all right, what kind of emotions is this making me feel? How should I respond? Should I yell? Probably not. Maybe so. More often than not, probably not. Think about your response. So it's important to pause and then respond instead of just spouting off what you think again and again, because that is not emotionally intelligent. Relationship management sort of speaks for itself, and the book goes into more detail. I don't want to run out of time. This is an interesting website too. This is a little bit of an older chart. Again, another business that helps leaders, corporations become more emotionally intelligent. And there's specific examples of each of the different skills. They do combine the last two that I talked about, social awareness and relationship skill, into empathy, but it's all there. So that might be helpful too for you to use as a resource. We'll switch to mindset, another resource that you can use. This is Carol Dweck, and distilled to its core, there are two mindsets. And is anybody familiar with this work? Some of you I thought may be. Charlie, you probably are. All right, what are the two mindsets?
You have a fixed mindset,
Yep.
and then you have growth mindset.
That's right. All right, so fixed mindset. This is taken directly from the book. Creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. Intelligence, personality, and your character is a hand that you're dealt with and must live with your entire life. So you respond to every situation accordingly. You say, well, I was just born this, so I may as well do this, right? My folks were poor, I'm poor, you know, whatever it is, I'm just gonna keep doing that, right? Well, I was born a cheat and steal, so I'm gonna keep on doing that. Anybody watch Whistle and Diesel on YouTube? I watch a lot of YouTube. So there's, you know, I'm YouTube certified in many topics. And so, Dalton, you do? All right, so, you know, I've gone back and forth about Whistle and Diesel. He's a little too much for me sometimes, other times, like, I get him. The one, if you watch the one about him getting his stuff back from the guy who stole it. Okay, so this guy on YouTube, again, he's a kid, he's got a whole lot of money from just making YouTube videos, but this older gentleman, we'll call him, came over to this guy's property and he stole a ton of stuff from him. And the guy was stupid crook, because the YouTuber had cell cameras everywhere. So the guy, he steals the stuff, then he comes back after a buddy tells him, like, you know there are cameras down there, right? So he comes back and he spray paints the cameras while wearing a mask. He takes a tag off his vehicle. Like, anyway, so he misses a camera because there's one in a tree that he doesn't see. So that one has gotten everything. So the YouTuber, he does his research and he finds out where this guy lives, who he is, who his mama is, who his family is, all this. It's actually his next door neighbor. And it's in Tennessee somewhere where the guy's property is. And so he has a bunch of acreage. The guy next to him's got a bunch of acreage. So he goes over there, he calls the sheriff and he's like, hey, I got my stuff. I'm like, well, you gonna file a report? No, I haven't filed a report, but he's got my stuff. I got him on camera. I know he's got it. So anyway, my point is that guy who stole his stuff, fixed mindset, right? Guarantee you he came, that's what he came from. And he is stuck, right? You don't go steal somebody's stuff unless you have that mindset. If you have a growth mindset, you're dealt a hand, but that's just what you start with. And all of us in this room, I suspect, came from less than what we are today. I know I did. And a growth mindset believes that there is no limit. and that's here. A person's true potential is unknown, and it's unknowable. It is a product of years of passion, toil, and training. And with that, you can do pretty much anything. We become Beethoven? No. Some people take that "nothing is impossible" line a little bit too far, right? I mean, y'all deal with musicians daily, so you probably have some who think they are real prodigies. You have to temper that a little bit, but you know, within reason, things are very attainable. So the growth mindset is a very important place to start. And I encourage you to read that book because there's so many more details that it goes into about the two mindsets. And you can see it play out in different examples. And then there's a section in the book if you have, there's a section in the book on sports and the mindsets, which is an obvious comparison. I've shied away from that in talking about leadership because that's the cliche, you know, sports and leadership, right? But so there's a chapter on that. The chapter that is most helpful to me is the chapter or section on relationships. And she goes through relationships, familial, with her children, with others, and that discussion is extremely helpful. There's a section on educators and mindset as well that's really helpful of thinking about how we talk to our students in the classroom every day and how we can encourage them and maybe help them change their mindset a little bit by displaying that with them. The last book here that you see on the list, I didn't put anything in the in this quick summary handout because it's more of a like chicken soup for the soul book, I guess, in that it has a bunch of self-contained little things that they're anecdotes, they are points of encouragement, and then at the end of each of those 2 or 3 page things, there is always a call to action. So you have an action step for each day. This guy, Steve Siebold, the author, was a tennis prodigy, probably. Very, very good. But he says the thing that held him back from becoming a true tennis champion was himself and his mental toughness and mental awareness and knowledge. So he discovered that at a point in his life, and then he set about to make his mind become the sharpest tool that he had. And then he has shared a lot of this with us in this book, and it's an older book, but still very, very good. And you'll see in it, like he talks about, is about wealth, but it's really about just greatness in general and becoming great at whatever you do. So I encourage you to seek that out as well. These are all ebooks, I imagine, and you can get those. So again, this is an introduction and not anything in detail, but I wanted to share 4 resources with you that will open the door to you to change yourself for the better, and it does all start with us. So please, if you have questions, whatever, we got time to talk. A few minutes anyway.
We pretty much made his money off 6 months.
Whistling decent? That's a good point.
Roast on that typical southern and general.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Buys those trucks, always on just to prove a point.
Just to prove a point, yeah.
Just to prove a point.
Yeah. So people debate about, like, is he serious or not? And I think he's being really satirical about a generation of people. We talk about kids these days, but so if you hadn't watched him, he'll buy a lot of expensive stuff, and he has no regard for it. He will just absolutely destroy it. I hate squatted trucks, shit like that. I hate them with a passion. So Whistle Diesel built one and just destroyed it, and it was awesome.
I think
funny, they made he proved that Toyota pretty much built an invincible truck at one time in the 80s.
That's right. That's where the Hilos.
Yeah.
They're still running around.
I don't think you can do what we do for a living with a fixed mindset. I can't, no way.
Oh, I agree. I think healthcare is very much the same way. I think working with things in general or people, it's difficult to be successful in any way. I mean, you wouldn't be able to operate in a shop environment or on a factory floor if you had a fixed mindset, in most cases.
And most of the students that wind up failing out, that's what they've got. They don't want to learn new. And
Yeah.
that's the problem we got with older technicians, is they don't want to learn new technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you
Amen.
think that we have to have a different approach? Maybe, generationally, if we start there?
Well,
I mean, that's too generic probably, because everybody's different.
I think every generation has had, if we're talking specifically about mindset, I think every generation has had that. I think we have an opportunity to help our students recognize when they have a fixed mindset. And before you go out and tell people, like, you got a fixed mindset, go fix it.
I was thinking I was gonna use that as students.
Please read the book first, because, like, I didn't go into any detail about it, but there's so much more depth to the two mindsets. But especially if you read that in the section on education or on relationships, you can see how it plays out, and you'll have an aha moment when you read it, and you'll say, oh yeah, I taught so-and-so who was just like that. And maybe it's how they react to your feedback, or how they act in class, you know? Like, I know everything, right? You've all taught those. You can't teach me anything, like.
Or I got an A. I'm at all A's in high
Oh, that's the best one. Yeah. I was an ace, and that's the example that she talks about in the book. Like, that you're a big fish, and she uses a medical school example, right? So you breeze through your undergrad, or your pre-med coursework, your prerequisites, and you've just freaking killed it, right? You're like big fish in your science department. Then you get to med school, and you're not that. Everybody is really smart there, and your professors are super smart. And it's an awakening. It's an awakening for our students, because we don't have large high schools in our district, just a couple, right? Most of our students come from really, really small places. And when they come here, it truly is a shock. And many of them don't know how to act. You know, some of them shut down, and they need our help. But if they have a fixed mindset, that's where we lose some of them. Like, going back to your point there, that I think it's important to help those students recognize in themselves and help empower them to say, yeah, all I have known in the past is X town, and I graduated with 12 people. But that's not what I want for myself going forward, right? And there's nothing wrong. I might go back to my town where I graduated with 12 people forever. But I don't have to necessarily think like I always did in the past and limit myself to maybe just going to work at the gas station for the guy who's selling baked goods, making big bucks, paying me minimum wage, right?
How do you get them out of that right now mindset? Like,
Well, they want everything right now.
They want to overhaul the engine today.
Today, right? I think it goes back to the top of this, that everything is a process, and we do live I think it's Dweck. She says we live in a microwave generation where people expect to put something in the microwave, get out in 3 minutes, and I can't believe they really think you can overhaul an engine in a day. I would say that stress to them, it's a process, and just like maybe stretch it out. Like, you had to go through high school in 4 years. It's a process. some of it sucks, some of it's not as bad, but you can't get there in a single day. You're gonna do these steps today, you're gonna do those steps tomorrow, and then all these small steps are gonna add up. And then one day, you're gonna turn the last bolt, you're gonna say, I gotta run now, right?
I just want them to start answering emails. They literally will not respond.
That's true, that's true.
That's just in this last year.
But I think that's partly, I think it's a correlation with COVID. I don't know that it's a cause of it, but it's a correlation. I think that in general, that this generation, because of, they're so used to communicating in different ways than that. Our students don't use email, they're not familiar with it. You know, they text and if,
Text message.
yeah, and even then, they'll ignore text. And it's just because you're not one of their peers. And that's what it boils down to, you know. I did the same thing. I know when I was at Northeast, I didn't take email probably until after I left here as a student. Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But at the time, like I had, this was early, like 2000, 2001, and I had Bill Stone's class in philosophy, and he was huge using the internet then, using Blackboard. So my extent of the internet was like Napster and building my stuff, right? Which I had a bunch of. But he made us use Blackboard and try to make us email, and I never read any of that in his class. But your students are the same way. You see it every day. So I don't know the answer to that, Crystal. I wish I did. And if anybody does, share it. And you can get on the conference circuit and you can talk all over the world literally about it. Because it's something that comes up frequently. Anything else?
My biggest fear for the healthcare programs is that we may see over the next few years, well, we only graduate 50% of what we started with. They don't care. And they take care of people for a living. You make one wrong turn or you push the wrong method, you kill somebody. And at the end of the day, that's the professor's responsibility or the instructors when they're clinical sites.
And you're seeing, and I saw heads nodding over here, but you're seeing them, they just come in because somebody's told them like, you can make good money in healthcare. Is that what it is?
Great, get a
Yeah.
job.
That's what I started out with.
I served for 8 years on the board of nursing, and I saw the worst of the nursing profession, and it made me respect nursing. My daughter's a nurse, even more. But what I think I saw is they thought sometimes what happened in their private life, their personal life, when they were not at work, didn't affect what happened. And of course, in healthcare, we know that's not true. But I'm glad that 50% of the students don't make it to graduate. Because I close my eyes and I say, who's gonna be taking care of my 90-year-old grandmother or my grandchild? I want them to be that best nurse.
Do I gotta show that documentary on all those folks that's been put in jail for years for leaving something like that? Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, y'all all see that, don't you?
They fuss a lot about drug calculations and not passing that, like we require an 80, I don't know about them, on a drug calculation test, and they will fuss and fuss and fuss, and I'm like, look, I mean, then I'm doing you a favor. You should have to make 100% on
You should have to make-
this,
yeah, exactly.
okay? Because
This will
I
kill
don't want to
somebody.
be, exactly, like, I don't want to be the person that, you know, you've already met your 80% quota for the
Right.
day, and then I'm your next patient, you know. Every semester, you know, I'm like, I'm doing you a huge favor.
Right.
You should be having to make 100, so you should be happy with, you know.
Right, you sit down with HR like,
I wish I
I got
was.
8 out of 10 right
That's right.
Hey, what's wrong?
That's what they tell us every time, too. It's like,
I wish our students could go and sit on some of those hearings. I know that like Hines and Holmes could because it was cost effective for them to do it. It's an overnight trip for our students to do that. But I think that when we're talking about pre-charging or we're talking about whatever, and they see that nurse crying, because they're losing their license or what they've got to do to jump through the hoops to
We
get them back.
actually do our graduating ADN students, we have a portion where we talk to them about the legal aspects of their responsibility.
I think that when they see it.
We do that as well. You can actually get on the board of nursing and watch it
Live
YouTube.
stream.
You can YouTube.
Doc,
And So,
I'll end with one more thing. So I'm fairly new to this teaching process, but the first thing I seen the first semester was, if I published something, they could do their what if grade. I had 9 students come in and say, well, I only gotta make a 37 or 40 today. And they literally made that. They didn't care if they had the 95 or the 75, because they said, I'm gonna make the same pay.
I mean, they're not wrong. Well, that's where that empathy comes in. though.
Right.
Imagine you are the patient and I'm the nurse. How much should I get wrong?
Right. I think it's a good point. Yeah, if imagine you're working on your grandmother.
Exactly.
Or your mother. And
Yeah, exactly. How much do you want, how bad do you want to mess up?
yeah, D's mean degrees, but you know, is that really the best thing? And that goes back to, I think if we can instill some of this in our students, and really it all comes back to what Maxwell said in his book, first person you lead is you. And if you can instill in a student that they are leading themselves and to encourage them to be personally responsible, then it would take care of a lot of this. But you know, a lot of the problems that y'all see is due to immaturity. You know, it's immature to just think that you're gonna go in and knock out a career because you made a lot of money at it. When it's something like healthcare. If it's selling vape pens, that's different, you know? It might still kill people, but you're not gonna be held personally responsible as you are as a nurse or a respiratory therapist, right? You're just not. So I think a lot of it comes back to responsibility and leading yourself. So I'll be quiet. Y'all got other places to go and we're late. So thank y'all for sticking in and sweating. And tell people we actually did hot yoga.